Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. Today's episode is sponsored by the Costumes Rental Corporation. Today's guest is a skilled and seasoned costume designer whose credits attest to her mastery of her craft amongst all genres. She's known for the work she did with George Clooney in films like The Tender Bar, The Midnight Sky, Suburbicon, and the upcoming The Boys in the Boat. She started out her career by studying fashion merchandising in the University of Missouri. After moving to Los Angeles, she became a freelance designer, hopping from job to job, and once she realized that working as a costume designer on film sets was something worth pursuing, she became an assistant to well-known costume designer Mary Zophres. She has been nominated for several noteworthy awards and won 3 Costume Designers Guild Awards, not to mention many other nominations. She was also nominated for the miniseries Olive Kitteridge for a Primetime Emmy Award. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome Jenny Eagan to the Designing Hollywood Show. Jenny, as I was saying to you, it's so great to have you here. You have one very cool resume, and I can't wait to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to it. I appreciate that.
Well, I've got to ask, I mean, obviously, before we get into the actual films, I'm always curious. All the designers I talked to, a lot of them started with ideas of getting into fashion. And then the industry kind of, the film and motion picture and television industry sort of grabbed a hold of them and steered them in another direction. Is that kind of what happened to you, or did you always kind of want to go into movies and TV?
That's funny. I didn't even know this job existed. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I watched movies. Of course, I was an avid watcher. And of course, I saw the clothes, in all of these films. And I, in awe, and how can I get that? Little town in Missouri, it wasn't always available to us. And so, when I moved west with the fashion merchandising, I didn't know what I was going to do, and moving to San Diego, did a little playing, waited tables, trying to figure it out. And I headed north a little bit thinking, I've got to do something. My parents sent me to college. This is, I can't they'll be upset. So, I moved north and had a lot of friends, trying to take off in the industry and learn it. And I started talking, and they mentioned costumes and, just this is what people do. And I just really started getting interested in film in general, of course, because I loved it. How exciting would this be? And I got a job through a friend on small budget movie doing in the office, assistant production coordinator. And the woman I worked with so generously said, well, meet the costume designers. Because I said, I think I want to do costumes. I think this is my place. And so she introduced me. And on the second film, it was the lovely Mary Zophres. And I said, I want to do what you do. Can I work with you? What can I do? And slowly but surely, I worked with them a little bit, did my best. And she invited me to go to Florida and be a PA. And I just started from there, at the bottom, and just in awe constantly of what is this? It's bigger than life.
Well, a lot of people, I too started out doing PA work on horror films, and that's where I learned the art department and the costume department. And you too started as a production assistant. I've always maintained that I think everybody that wants to work in film or television should be a production assistant. Do you think that's still true today?
100%. I mean, and I never got to go to film school. I didn't understand, there's so much that I didn't know. And I think in general, there's so much you still don't know. The inner workings of film, it changes. I mean, it changes. It's changed so drastically since even when I started, many moons ago. But it is just such a learning experience. And if you throw yourself in it, both feet all the way in, asking questions, doing whatever asked of you, whether it be getting ice or coffee or lunch, soon becomes, can you do this? And you get in and you hear the conversation. When I started as a PA, I would stay until the designer left. I would listen to everything that was said. I asked the questions, where can I be? And just stuck my nose in. And that's where, and people recognize it and they see, look at that, she works hard. This is something we're looking for. That's it. Just put your nose to the grindstone and keep going. And you will eventually get seen. And that's what people want. They want somebody that's going to work hard alongside them, push hard to help. Because it's you don't do this alone, and you need every single person, whether it be a PA, whether it be, for us, your costumers, your assistants, your tailor shop, everyone is collectively putting all the work in to make this one thing happen, in the costume department and every other department. So yeah, I think that's where you learn a lot. Your education starts there.
Right. Now, you were a production assistant on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the Coen Brothers. Now, did you first meet George Clooney on that film?
Yeah, I mean, meat is such a, well, he, from afar, I saw him running down, in his overalls. But, you were present he'd come in for a fitting, and, just a generous, kind person always, and, and respectful. And so, but, it's always kind of standing in the background. And on a film like Oh Brother, something so small and contained, like with the Coen Brother things, you were able to be close by and hear things. You don't your fitting room isn't enclosed, and words are being said, so you hear what actors are speaking or what they're looking for, or the collaboration with the designer. So yeah, I mean, I get to see him from afar and hear his voice and think, oh, he's from ER.
Well, I mean, I asked that because then you went on and you have a ongoing relationship with him as his costume designer on the films he's now directing. And that relationship has continued on. You just did his latest film, The Boys in the Boat, which I was telling you earlier is of particular interest to me coming from Seattle, because that story is one of those sort of, it's a great Seattle, it's not a legend because it happened, and I'm so happy you guys have worked on that film together. I know it hasn't come out yet, but very exciting that you developed that kind of relationship, and that you have a lot of the costume designers have these ongoing relationships with the directors or the cinematographers or the production designers that they work with, which is fantastic. And it's kind of great that you seem to have that relationship with Rian Johnson on the Knives Out films, and Cary Fukunaga. You work with him on True Detective and Beasts of No Nation. And it's great that you seem to have had those relationships that have served you well.
Well, and I appreciate them, for entrusting me into their vision. And, I think those relationships are formed through a mutual understanding and collaboration. And, once you start to get to know, I think, a director or anyone you collaborate, I mean, it's a little bit easier, for a director, as there's so much on their brain, and there's so much going on, and so many people coming at them. But once you sort of get to understand somebody's, the way they work, or, sometimes we may assume or presume something's going to go away, but you also learn how to ask the questions without being overbearing or too much, or maybe, or you guess maybe how they're going to react. But it just becomes a little bit more condensed and more simple for everyone involved. And I think that is what is so wonderful about these experiences. You kind of understand, you can read it, understanding a little bit, I understand what their thought process here, or what they may be looking for. And it's also it's intimidating and scary every time you start a new job, whether it be an actor, director, or just another director, because what you may interpret from the script may not be what they're looking for, and you certainly want to get it right. So I think those relationships make it a little bit easier to have that, I can go straight in there and ask the direct question, rather than, well, maybe you could, wonder what they're thinking. It's a safe space.
No, absolutely. Now, I have to ask you, I'm a big fan of your design work and across the board in the films that you've worked on. Did you have touchstones, like we talked earlier about 80s movies, when you got into the business and started doing costume design work? Did you have movies and things that you drew upon from your past that you really loved? Did you have favorite, in terms of costume design, favorite films growing up?
I would probably say, yeah. I mean, like we said, the 80s, any John Hughes film, I think only because it was, touching my heart, or touching, how can this be? I'm in this world that I feel so connected to, and I think those kinds of things, for me, again, not really knowing the connection between film and costume design, I don't know until later did I understand, like, oh, wow, that touched me. Or, I can't say anything specifically. It's only now where I look at it differently,
Yeah.
the way I watch a film and the way it comes to me that way. And I think for me, I'm pleased that I didn't, because I think it sunk in a different way. I wasn't looking at it thinking about it that way. I think just the love of film sort of helps. And maybe it's helpful for me because it keeps my mind open to what a possibility could be, or, not mimicking something or not copying something. I don't know, but I just, there's nothing that speaks out other than those films. I think because I just played them on repeat over and over. Get the Blockbuster Video weekend, was probably usually just one of those films, Breakfast Club or, whatever they were, just so I could feel that, say like, oh, I'm not doing this alone.
Well, to me, it's interesting because teen films were kind of like, if you're watching a Penelope Spheris movie or something, a punk rock movie, all the punkers kind of dressed the same. But if you look at a movie like Pretty in Pink, you had Ducky, who was like a mod, and then you had James Spader's character wearing his linen suits, and Andrew McCarthy's character, like the rich kids. And the fashion was what delineated immediately which characters and which groups they belonged to, but they were different than other movies of the time. And I think I started also paying attention to fashion, at least in terms, like I was wearing Argyle sweaters and jeans and topside. Like, what the hell did I know where fashion in high school? And I think that's one of the things that was great about those John Hughes movies is there was a sense of style and fashion more so than your generic high school kid movies of the time. Like, I mean, I love Risky Business, but everyone's dressed kind of the same. There isn't a lot of fashion flair going on as much as I love that film. And I thought, like, I look at movies that you did, like Now You See Me. Now You See Me was a movie that I look cool. But when you went and saw it, the characters, there was a flair to there was a flair to everything. I think Louis Leterrier directed that movie, and it had a flair to it, and the characters had such panache. Yeah. And that was very much a part of the well, I hate to say mise en scène, but let's go to film school. That idea. So when you started on a movie like that, Now You See Me, that it did have a cool factor to it. Now, was that something that you started from the get-go, like after reading the script, did you think, okay, this is going to look stylish, these characters are going to look badass? Was that something that was that you wanted to convey from the beginning, or did that develop as you moved along through that film?
Well, that film in particular, that was maybe, I think, the second film that I'd ever worked on. So I was, terrified. And I remember them saying, in order to get this job, you need to present in front of the studio. So it was one of those, experiences where you spent weeks preparing for something, and in your idea, what is that? And, how do I do this? I don't know. I'd been an assistant for a very long time, but I still, doing it by yourself or trying to understand it by yourself is a whole different ballgame. And I think it was just each one of these characters were cool, and magic is cool, and I wanted that feeling that it wasn't, top hats and, bow ties or what this is. So I wanted to make it feel, and, Louis was a big part of that. And he was really supportive and really, by my side and helping me walk through it, discussing the characters. And, I was so grateful for that because he helped me get that job and he helped me push me. And, having the relationship with the actors that were, like Woody and everybody in that had such experience, though you forget that those are also your teachers. Sure. They're not you want them to look as great as they do and, help walking through those characters together. So that was a big teaching moment for me in learning how to develop character, because essentially that's the most important thing for me, character, and how do we describe it through the clothes without being overbearing or being too much for the audience. It's, you have to immediately jump off the page, especially when you have an ensemble like that. Each person needs to have their, specific characterizations about themselves so you can, move along the story. But, then keeping it consistent, I think, is also really important.
Well, soon after we were talking about this earlier too, the first season of HBO's True Detective with Cary Fukunaga, and again, Woody Harrelson was in that as well. Again, a show, the atmosphere was dripping from that. I mean, every frame, and part of that was the clothes and that the environment. And first of all, did you get was part of the reason you got that job, was that because of Woody Harrelson, or was that just coincidental that he was in that show?
No, I think it was really coincidental. I mean, my agent said, they've been looking for a costume designer, read these couple scripts. And so I did, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. Now this jumps off the page. Your jaw dropped. Like, I couldn't believe how well written something was. And, I didn't really know much of Carrie's work at the time. And I went north to San Francisco to see my brother, and he happened to be in Oakland. So we met up at a random restaurant where no one was at, and thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this job. I just don't have the experience. But I think sometimes it's also like the meeting or the relationship or, the conversation that you get into, knowing the comfortability that you have with one another. Can he be comfortable to ask for what he wants or tell me no? Or what am I going to do differently than somebody else? Or maybe it's just right time, right place, right time. I don't know how that one went down, but whatever it was, I wanted it. When I read it, it was like, I'll do whatever it takes. And I put a big portfolio together, and tried to grab pictures from there and things that, maybe not necessarily about the clothes, but captured a feeling, which is sometimes, artwork or, photography books or anything, research like that doesn't have to be necessarily the clothes, but if they understand you get the feeling of the product
Right.
they're trying to give, that can help so much. So it's not, and then you jump off from there. I mean, that show also, I had a lot of time to prepare for that. And when I got down to New Orleans, every single wall in that office that I had was covered, and it started at the beginning of the story and it went all the way through room to room. He could walk around there and see from a visual, and not just about clothes, but atmosphere and locations. And not that I was taking that, but it just what my feelings were. And I think that really helped him he'd come and stare at the wall at different and take a walk around, and everyone, in the costume department or any of the other departments could kind of imagine where, costumes might be going. And I think that was just a collaboration, a really close team, weekly going over the scripts and talking about locations and costumes. And we were all on the same page. So I think, and when you sit down that long with, either your production designer, your DP, props, everyone, you're on the same page. And, and it's such a helpful tool to move forward. And that was the brilliance of that show. It was an amazing. And that sort of really kicked off everything for me, I think, but it was difficult to kind of maintain that subtlety of it. And was everybody going to get bored with what, I was doing with Woody? And I think it was everything else. It was the background atmosphere that was telling that story of where we were,
Oh, just incredible. And again, the look of that show was so hypnotic, and it really worked to tell that story. You guys did exemplary work on that show. Amazing.
Thank you.
I can't tell you how many times I told you, but I've watched it a lot. There's a lot to learn from that miniseries.
Yes.
But then you jumped on and you did two projects that I think, again, you did Beasts of No Nation, which is a hard movie to watch, a hard subject matter to cover. And then you also did Our Brand is Crisis, which again, they're both movies that were not necessarily about, very different from True Detective. You're in different parts of the world. You're in Bolivia, you're in Africa, you're dealing with very topical subjects and in difficult, arduous conditions. But there's something, I love the fact that you were kind of tackling these larger global issues. And again, a great job with the design work that you did. Now, I have to ask, when you're working on these kinds of projects, like, do you go to these countries? Did you go to Bolivia, or do you go to Africa? Do you just immerse yourself in the research?
Yeah, well, with Beasts of No Nation, Africa, it was, Carrie has suggested, take a look at Commodores, which was an actual, child soldier group at the time that what we were doing. And so I took and it's incredible. And so it just leapt off the page. But the frightening part was, I've never been to Ghana. I don't know what's there, what to expect,
Right.
how to do it. And there's not a huge film pool there of people that work. And so there was a woman there that had worked in some film and understood. So she was very kind of helpful. And so, yeah, then we just got on a plane and got over there and, threw caution to the wind and went for it. It was hard physically, it was not all of the things that you're used to having. And it wasn't easy, but one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, to be able to make it through and make such a beautiful film. I mean, you're right. It is very difficult to watch, and it was probably even more difficult to film as well.
Sure.
It was just really hard. And then, in Our Brand is Crisis, David Gordon Green, who is such a dear friend, he suggested I come with him and the production designer on their scout when they went over. And so I hopped on a plane with them and went shopping, and we brought all of this stuff back. Well, we eventually went back to film there for a little bit, but I brought some stuff back with us, and we all, each of us carried bags, through security and customs. And, it was a funny story. I remember we got through and David went first, and the customs agent on the other side said, well, what is all this? And David said, oh, we just really like to shop. I laughed. I said, it's for a film. Like, they're going to let us through. It's okay. It's better to say it's for a film than, but it was, he was trying. But the experience of going there really anywhere, even going to New Orleans when, you walk around different parts of the city if you have time, or I did a movie called Widows, and walking around Chicago and different places, you get to experience what you're looking at, or what you need to invest into the film. And I think by going to Bolivia or Ghana, it just changes everything. There's nothing like the real location.
No, and I, again, in a short period of time, you started working with George as a director on Suburbicon. You did Widows, which is amazing. You did the Maniac TV series, and Hostiles, which is another movie with Christian Bale that kicks ass. You're looking at the West. So you're making crime thrillers in Chicago, or in American Animals, and then you're doing period pieces like Hostiles or Suburbicon. I mean, the diversity of the stuff that you were doing in a pretty short period of time is pretty amazing to see how diverse your tastes are and just what your work encompassed. And that's one of the things, as I was looking into your past, how impressive your career is, because you did Widows you have an ensemble of different kinds of. How much fun was that for you to work with them?
So, the Sir Steve McQueen now, what an incredible, not just as a director, but an artist, a human, somebody that questions everything all the time. And honestly, working with people like that, it forces you to push yourself farther, to ask bigger questions, and grateful for all of that. And those women, each one of them in their own right, are so extraordinary. And having that moment to spend with each of them and get to know them and see vulnerabilities and just, I love working with a women cast, because we just all learn so much and support each other. It's just the beauty.
And of course, led by the ferocious Viola Davis, who could do no wrong. I mean, and talk about diversity in terms of the kind of roles that she can play, and she just tears into them. And she was great in Widows. I loved her in Widows.
Yeah, and she's just, she's such a beautiful person that really respects all of us and the department, and respects the fact that I do costume design, and really leans into it, and open to suggestions and working together with you. And I think that is the sign of a true professional, and why, she can open herself up. It's not about, who she thinks she is, but it's about this character, and allowing that collaboration for us to work together, and hearing, what are your thoughts? What do you see? Because, we're all an audience, whether we're working on the film or not. And I think that that's what is so extraordinary about her.
What was it like working with George Clooney that first time as a director?
Oh, terrifying. I mean, I think it's terrifying in the way that, you don't want to let, your expectations are so high, and from this is a big movie star, he's got a lot going on, and he's done a lot of films. He's directed a lot of films. There's a lot of for me felt like I can't disappoint, so it was intimidating at first because I wasn't sure how much time will I get, will there be a relationship. He produced Our Brand is Crisis, and I worked on that with his producing partner Grant Heslov, who was present for the filming of that, and I think we got to know that relationship, and so I think that sort of opened it up. And so the first time it was terrifying. I mean, but then, once you meet him and once you get going and you start collaborating, he's such a warm and engaging person and really open to it. He'll let you know if it's not what he wants or what he's looking for. And it's nice though, because you're not guessing, that's what's refreshing about working with George, is he'll tell you. And I appreciate that.
No, I mean, and I really like that film too. It was written by, again, the Coen Brothers. So it goes all the way back to you were a production assistant on Old Brother, Where Art Thou? It's all, that continual.
I was lucky enough to work with Mary on many of the Coen Brother films beyond Oh Brother. So I think, and her, working with her resume is also very diverse. So I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work on Westerns, to sort of have my film school education through the many years I spent. And I spent a lot of time assisting because I thought, this is where I'm going to learn. This is where I'm going to figure out. And even though when you step out after that, you step into designing, it's still scary. It's still that frightening. Am I going to be right? It's still on every movie. It's still the same thing.
Sure.
But you can rely on that and lean back into what you've been taught, or what you looking at it saying, well, I'm going to do this. And it just, kind of moves from there. But with that experience, with all the time I spent as an assistant, really sort of helped me to move forward and into this diverse. I'm not afraid. And I like keeping it diverse because I enjoy the challenges.
Well, it's so interesting because you have done contemporary crime thrillers. You've done 50s satires. Do you have a favorite genre that you like working in?
Oh, no. I mean, of course, I really, enjoy, doing the period thing, but, different periods or different time periods. I think they're all just, every film you do is a learning. There's learning lessons on them all. And so whether you apply it to, 1895 or 1950 or 2022, there are lessons that help you, move forward on the next one, whatever they are. And, you the more experience you gain, it gives you a little bit more confidence to tackle something maybe that you haven't done before. And, it's just relying in the support of a team that you build together to, question you and be by your side and say, that doesn't work, or how do we get through this? I think those are all the things. But, now it's just a challenge, and it's fun to, if somebody's going to give me the opportunity to try something I've never done, let's jump in there.
Do you approach, even though you worked in, whether it's period, contemporary, or science fiction in the future, like The Midnight Sky, do you approach everything the same way, or do you have different approaches to different kinds of films? Do you approach a period piece one way or a contemporary film another way, or is the process for you the same?
I guess I would say it's pretty similar. I mean, it all has to start from, the moment of, the reading the script, and then the terrifying, oh, geez, how am I going to tackle this thing? It's, you're terrified of big picture. And so I start with the broad sort of research and try to see, okay, what in general, what is this? What is a palette? What is the feeling? And then you can because then you're saddled with, okay, this actor's available now. Oh my gosh, okay, I have to dive into that character, right? So it kind of depends on what comes up, but there's always, no matter what it is, that overwhelming feeling, I'll never get it done because I can't see the big picture. So it has to be, you're forced into starting, okay, this person's ready. So I'll start there. And then you start diving in character to character. But I usually start, before going into characters, I like to build the worlds that we're living in, the atmosphere, and where are we, and what's socioeconomic and all of those kinds of things. So, and then you can kind of hone in on characterization a little bit more.
Now, but I want to obviously I do want to get to Glass Onion and do a little bit more of a deep dive into that, obviously. But I'm also curious in terms of your relationship with the production designer and with your camera person. Do you work concurrently with them in pre-production to sort of work on that color palette? Like, will you change what you do based on, say, the cameras they're going to shoot with, lenses they're going to shoot with, lighting schemes, and the colors that the production design or the art department is going to utilize? Do you work in tandem?
Oh yeah, for sure. They're always on before me. They are always, 10 steps ahead. So they're kind of a rock. You turn once the job starts for you, I immediately turn to the production designer and where are we? What is this world that you've created? Because, it really sets a bar for, what they've been, they have the ear of the director. They've been on, scouts, they've found the locations, they're building sets by the time. Usually, I mean, there are, different reasons why we might come on a little bit earlier, but in my experience, they've been on. And so they're kind of like, your Bible to say, okay, this is a color palette. Sometimes you might have started and you're off, but I find what's really interesting is a lot of the times once I meet with them, we're really kind of on the same page. I have never really found it to be, a different, maybe because it's on the page, and the scripts have been so wonderful that it's just kind of in there in the open. And so I find it there. And then, I'll go to the DP or even the gaffer, sometimes who can explain it to me in ways that I might not understand. Again, I don't have a great history of understanding all these things. So, sometimes I have to look things up or sometimes I have to ask deeper questions and not feeling ashamed that I don't know. I mean, the cameras are changing, the lenses are changing. I have no idea. So how does that work? And how does that affect me? Or, and DPs are incredibly helpful most of the time, and in my experience that, asking them or, hey, presenting them with things, colors or swatches, how is this going to work? And they're so open to it. And I'm so grateful to that because sometimes I don't know, I'm not going to lie about that. But, the truth is we do have to work together. And sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes they'll come to me, what are you doing with this? Because it may be bigger for the characters than it is for maybe the room or wherever we may be. So we both kind of lean on each other. And that's the best part, really, the collaboration.
Well, speaking of collaborations, you now have, like, I think it's still, no, maybe it's not in theaters, but it's going to be streaming in a couple weeks again. Not the Knives Out mystery, The Glass Onion, the second Knives Out film. You came back, you did the first film, the second film, totally different milieu, totally different characters, other than Benoit Blanc. You come back, second movie here with Rian Johnson in this franchise that you now have helped create. First of all, this movie's delightful, and I was a huge fan of the first movie. But again, the milieu of that film is completely different from this new film. Everything about it, the colors different, the feel is different, the characters are different, except Benoit Blanc. And suddenly I gotta ask, when you're gonna now dress James Bond, and a man who has Tom Ford making his suits for him, and then some of the greatest clothes in the world. You're gonna create a character with him. Like, what does Benoit Blanc look like? What was it like for the two of you to collaborate together? And he speaks very highly of you. And what was it like beginning to work and create the character, the look of the character of Benoit Blanc? And how did it change from Knives Out to The Glass Onion?
Well, I think, initially I had worked years before that with Daniel as an assistant on a film called Cowboys and Aliens. So, and he's an extraordinary human being and really funny. And, just his humor is contagious. And so I didn't know him well, but I understood that he is very relaxed and very, he's very collaborative in the experience. And I knew that this was incredibly important for him in terms of leaving Bond, or not the first one, but, it was kind of coming to an end, and what this new character that he's building completely different than that. So I just kind of knew it was going to be fun, and I knew he was respectful and kind. So it was a great leap off, and just presenting him with things like thoughts and him going back and forth. And it was a very open kind of conversation. And I think the first one was keeping it simple. But what we sort of established was Benoit Blanc, inserting himself into the location or wherever he's going. It's a chameleon. I'm going to fit in and be this guy and not stand out in a crowd. So I think, that's kind of the correlation between the two. I mean, no matter where he's going, Daniel always says, I've been there before. Benoit Blanc has been to all of these places. So he knows what he's getting into. So, he's prepared for that, although he kind of masks and keeps that like, oh, I don't know what is happening here. Why am I here? But he plays it so well. But, there's a dapperness to him. He's still stylish. He takes care of himself. And that's the fun part. It's not, there's something special about him and being that creative. And so it's incredibly fun. He's just so open to it, and he'll try anything, whether he thinks it works or not. He's still going to try it on, and give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, his performance is so. It's funny seeing him in Steven Soderbergh's movie Logan Lucky, when he first started doing a crazy, like an American accent, and it was so what you were not expecting from him. And watching him as Benoit Blanc, it's so great because that character is as indelible as James Bond is, and maybe even more fun, because he's clearly having such a good time with it. Yeah. Now, I'd heard he had thrown out references of things for you, like the movies of Jacques Tati or Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. And was that something that he was doing with you and telling you to look at these things?
Yeah. Early on when it was like, I started on and immediately it was Daniel wants to talk. And so we get on the phone and he threw me, to Jacques Tati and To Catch a Thief, 2 images. And I just got it. I think it's kind of a simple, you have, again, like the directors you work with, you sort of understand the character, but you also understand him, and kind of where it's going, or you think. And so then you kind of, that's your jumping off point. Because he knows this character way better than I. He and Ryan have probably been talking for the 2 years during COVID, trying to figure out the story. I know Ryan wrote it, but, I'm sure Daniel came in at the end, was like, oh, I could do this. Or, I'm sure they'd had those conversations. And so when that happens, then it's a jumping off point. And so you start figuring those things out and you just bring it to him. And that's the fun, I think, for a lot of actors. And they say it a lot of time, walking into that room and don't know really who they're playing. I mean, it's on the page, but how am I going to do it? I think for him, putting on the clothes and standing in the mirror and posing and, who's this new Benoit Blanc?
Right.
Who is this guy going to Greece? And that's fun. And it's fun for us to see it happening, to evolve.
Well, other characters like Kate Hudson in this film, you created a gown for her that's just, it's unbelievable. And is it true that you were looking to her mom, to Goldie Hawn, in a movie like Overboard? Was that true? You were looking for her 80s work for inspiration for Kate Hudson?
How could you not? I mean, extraordinary. And, the character on the page sort of felt a little, similar in certain ways. And it was that's such a beautifully well done movie. And I think for her, it was just, how big can we go? How Verdi is big, and I've got to meet that without, killing it. But it was a big deal. And I thought she's, the big prince became really important. But with her, it started, there was lots of research, a lot of talking about it. I remember we had made some stuff for the first fitting. She came in and I said, oh, by the way, Kate, we're making everything. She said, oh my God, and that is the biggest compliment that a costume designer, I think, can get a lot of times, is because, some people get frightened of making clothes, not sure if it's going to work out the right way. But she is such a professional. And I mean, the experience was a joy from beginning to end. And there was never a moment that she wasn't pushing it even further. Oh, we could do this and this. And that's, that brings the joy to it, because it's not tough. None of those cast members, everybody knew what they were getting into. The success of the first one brings into this, and knowing that they can trust their director, like Rian Johnson, who's written an incredible script, and he's such a kind, caring, supportive person of everyone. And so I think they felt safe, and we all done it before, and they're like, well, I'm falling into hands. they can't mess this up for me. So that is just, it's a a family that I'm grateful to have been asked to become a part of. And I hope it continues, like they said, forever and ever until they both get tired of doing it. But I'm along for the ride for sure.
Oh, I mean, all those characters are so great. I mean, and having, you dress a huge guy like Dave Bautista, and then of course Ed Norton, who's known as one of the great thespians who's working in cinema.
Oh.
He takes his work very seriously, and it was great to see him come back having a ball.
Well, and the thing is, it's always intimidating with people that have this experience and they're professionals, but each of them, like Edward, wanted to discuss this character at length, wanted to go through it, which I admire and respect and am welcoming to all of it. I often say this, and it's probably boring, but I give them the tools and they use those tools however it is, and however I can help them and adjust them or whatever they need. Essentially, that's what we are. We're a team building this together, and all of their information and wants, I welcome it, and Dave Bautista was somebody, like, he came in he was my first fitting on the film, and I brought out, the bikini, and oh Lord, like, it's not the most exciting fitting to have for him. What do you mean I have to put this on? And then it went into the sarong and then the Crocs, and then, just building that character was so fun, and him going, what is this? Not sure. But, he, again, somebody that entrusted and into it and opened himself up. And I think it played out very well for him, and all of them, really.
And I do love the fact that you touched on Goldie Hawn, because in the 80s, she was one of, in a way, her 80s comedies have kind of been forgotten. I don't know if you've ever
forget. I'll never forget.
Private Benjamin is one of my favorite. One of the great costume jokes when they're giving her fatigue, she says, "Do these come in any other color than green?" It's just one of the great. I hope somebody releases that on 4K disc soon, because man, do I love Goldie Hawn, and I love Private Benjamin. But so what I love about you've had a tendency to work with ensemble casts, and I really love your work with those ensemble casts, because, like in Widows, for instance, the women are all very different. And you really bring the personalities forth through their clothes. Now, I'm curious, when you meet an actor for a fitting, has there ever been a time when the character, when you see an actor, you've made something for them, and the actor then, after you've had a fitting with them, you're like, you know what, I want to change something? Because after interacting with them, you see that there's something that you might not have noticed, or not have known that they would have brought to something, and you want to change up your approach to sort of accentuate what you've seen with an actor now that you've met them.
Oh, yes, 100%. It happens quite often, more often than not, I think. Well, I guess it goes back and forth. It depends on how, what that first meeting like or entails, or how big it is, or how quickly, sometimes the first Knives Out, they all flew in a week before, and this wasn't it, but it was sort of, get it done quick. But so, yeah, I've had times where they come in, the fitting starts, it's not going well. Sometimes they don't always go well. Sometimes you get off on a wrong foot, maybe personality feels off. And I've stopped it. And I've said, you know what, listen, let's try this again. Let's all step away. We could talk about this some more, or maybe it doesn't fit the right way, or we've got the sizes wrong, those kinds of things. And then you come back and you start again. Because we don't always get it right. But I think more importantly than fittings, yes, but it's also sometimes when you start filming, you see the way the actor approaches, even maybe the second day, third day, something in, and you're like, oh, this is how they're playing it. And that then evolves the costumes and the characters, and the light bulb goes off and you think, oh, wow, I need to go this way. Or a funny story. True Detective, once we were filming, and Woody Harrelson, I had striped shirts on him all the time, and Matthew McConaughey had solid shirts, and Woody was like, well, how come I'm always wearing stripes? And I was like, you want to wear solid? Well, wear solid, but you've worn stripes before. You've got to go back and forth. And then we had to wait, like 15, 20 minutes. And he was like, no, we'll just go. And I said, no, you wanted the solid. We're going to do it. So it's kind of like, it isn't as easy as everyone thinks it is. It takes time. So I think it's just them understanding each other, and, you hope you trust in that relationships that you build from the beginning. But yeah, it's not always fun and games. And sometimes it doesn't fit. or you get it wrong and you feel really uncomfortable, you feel bad, and how am I going to get this right? And it's depressing. It is, because you want to be great. We all do first time around, but we're not perfect. And so mistakes happen, and you hope that you don't get fired.
Well, listen, before we run out of time, I want to ask you, obviously it's so much fun to speak with you. I could probably talk to you for another 4 hours, but with a lot of people now, we've got Instagram, we've got social media, people are being able to share their work more than they've ever been able to do so before. But having a great foundation, whether it's academic or whether it's because you've apprenticed or done the kind of work you need to make it in the industry, what advice could you give to up and coming designers who maybe want to follow in your footsteps? Not take your jobs though.
Well, they're going to, at some point. That it just happens inevitably, and that times change and they evolve, and the way we work has changed. And my advice, again, like we talked about in the beginning, and is PAing. I think, like, starting out from the bottom and understanding how maybe the whole department works, or if costumes or art department is something you really want to do. That's where kind of you can learn and understand. You might want to go try the set, or you might want to try something, and that's okay. But as long as you work hard, I would say, and always remember, maybe if it isn't, you don't agree with the way that somebody works, or you don't like that, remember, you can always do it your way when you get your job. I just remember learning that as I was coming up and working in different things, and understanding and seeing how different maybe set worked, and, I'm going to do it a different way, or just because maybe I thought it was simpler, but it isn't mine. It's mine to sit back and learn. And I think that's just listen and, be aware and be present and work hard. I think that's, at the end of the day, ask how you can be of help, and you will learn, and it will all come. And kindness, I think, across the board, because, like we always say, that PA working alongside you on set probably will be your producer. And it has happened for me, it's
Right.
happened. And so I don't think it's just inherent in you. We're all kind. Just remember that every day when you step either into the office, and we all have moments. We're not all perfect, again, but I think kindness overall, and respect for each other, no matter what you're doing.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Now, are you on social media? Can people follow you on Instagram?
I am. You were just saying that I am the worst. I am on Instagram. It's very hard for me to, promote myself. I think it's an uncomfortable thing for me, because I don't know, it's, I feel like I'm gloating, or I know, but it's really important. And I appreciate watching my colleagues and my friends, and I support all the designers that do it. I think I'm also really bad at it. So I'm not sure. I asked a friend the other day, I said, can you help me? Because I really don't know how. And I don't want to sound like ignorant, out of touch tech, non-tech able, but I do need to get better at it, because not only for me, but the support of the film. And I know people really want to know. And
yeah, I mean, if you think of it as an academic exercise,
Sure.
So like someone like myself, it'd be great to have a repository to go and see what was Jenny Eagan all about, and take us through your various projects, the development process, and show us your thought process. I mean, I know it's asking a lot, and I just like it for my own edification. It's cool to see. And now that we have this great communications technology, it's cool to have people who are willing to share those things with us, because people love to see how your process and how you came to where you came to on, I'd love to have seen a whole development process of True Detective, or Now You See Me, or Glass Onion. It would have been great.
Well, you know what? You're giving me a push. I think over the holidays, or, in the coming year, maybe that's my goal.
Because your work is very cool. Like, you do have a very cool, like, I'd love to see how you came up with all the spacesuits and stuff for Midnight Sky, but I could talk to you about that for another hour. Now, you, in addition to The Boys in the Boat with George Clooney, who directed that, you have another Ryan Reynolds collaboration. You did The Adam Project, which a very fun movie, and you're working with director John Krasinski on Imaginary Friends, or you already did.
Yes. Yeah. Just finished that up and just got back from New York. And, I pinch myself all the time. It is such a wonderful time, and I enjoy having these relationships with people, and forming relationships with directors that then I know. George and John Krasinski have a lovely friendship. So I'm sure at some point there were words exchanged. And I thanked Mr. Clooney for that. Thank you so much. And he was like, oh, all terrible things were said. I don't know how you got that job, but it is appreciative, and we work, but again, it's a consistency of coming at every project with the same strength and wanting greatness from all of them. So it's not, you don't ever sit back, and I don't ever try to take a break, because they're each important for every filmmaker and for myself, because you don't know what the next thing is.
Right.
Of course, we're all the same. There's no job. I'm never going to work again. But, this film business is tricky that way. But I am grateful for every experience that I've had to this far, and not one bad one, not one.
No, and I got to give a shout out to Ryan Reynolds himself, sponsors this YouTube channel that this show is on. So thank you, Mint Mobile, and thank you, Ryan Reynolds. And Imaginary Friends is coming soon.
Yes, thank you, Ryan Reynolds.
Well, Jenny Eagan, I want to thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Thanks for returning back here to the Designing Hollywood podcast, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Robert, thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
So much fun. Well, thank you again. Happy holidays to you. And thank you to our very impressive sponsor, Costumes Rental Corporation. The variety of costumes at Costumes Rental Corporation is expansive. CRC is recognized worldwide as the premier supplier of military and police costume uniform rentals. Costumes Rental Corporation takes pride in its commitment to each customer, helping to produce the type of exceptional look needed for a successful production. A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from The John Campea Show. Our technical director is Taylor Gonzalez. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeek Singularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.